the US Treasury market is no longer the preferred vehicle to park reserves into, and it's moving to gold and a marriage between that and blockchain, a trustless system, if you will. I think it's starting to accelerate. You're right. It is being more acknowledged, not only by people like us, but now you're beginning to see it at the highest levels of government and of central banks and commercial banks, and even on down to, to a level of sophistication where you're talking family offices and big money is starting to get it, that because of this K-shaped economy where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer because of the inflation and the cost of living, something has to be done, or this country is going to float into quasi third world status if we don't.
But if now suddenly we can reinvest our, our infrastructure in, developing these mining companies, then, and if silver and gold goes up in value and we can make money on it and we have rich deposits that were never tapped, it could end up being a positive for us in the long run.
Sure. I mean, you could make the same statement about uranium and all of these critical minerals that have really, due to regulations and restrictions and mostly the restrictions on the environment, a lot of this has expanded to other parts of the world, South America and South Africa and other countries that have exploited their reserves. It's an important deal. It really is.
Well, it could. I mean, Andy, you could think about it as, an investor doesn't sell until the investment is high, right? It could be one of those things where we were forced to hold. I mean, if you look at it that way, we were forced to hold and not take advantage of our resources because of stupid reasons, selfish reasons. And because we were forced to hold, now that we are realizing we need to mine these things, or we're, breaking the chains, the investment opportunity is high at this point.
It is, but it takes a long time to bring a mine.
I know.
Online.
We're talking decades,
years.
Aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the problem.
And we also have green energy policies. I know that in Minnesota, they have been working for decades to shut down these critical resource mines. And they've done the hoops they make these people jump through to do a mine is incredible.
Yeah, don't get me started on the policies of Minnesota. I left Minnesota largely because of those policies. And
well, it's one of the most critical mines. We have a really rich deposit in North Minnesota that could really bring jobs to the area, but really help the country strategically. And it's sitting there, it's ready to go, and they do everything they can to block it. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's too bad. And I have a client who spent a lot of time in the mining industry up in the Iron Belt up in northern Minnesota. I mean, I'm from Minnesota, so I'm very familiar with it, but the stories that he will tell you, it's crazy. You're right. They've done everything they can to mothball what should be exploited, instead of going around the world and being reliant on every other country, many of which we're not aligned with geopolitically, for things like silver or critical minerals or rare earths or any of the things that we need, is silly.
Well, and listen to this. I dug into this. The mine that they're trying to shut down is actually pretty clean. They're forcing us to get our critical minerals from China, and elsewhere, but most of it from China, who they're talking about pollution. And the pollution that this mine would put out is nothing compared to what the mine where they're forcing people or us to buy it from. And their stats, it's like 10 times the pollution. On top of that, how they're treating their workers, they're not paying them well, and almost like slave labor. So these people who are mothballing it, as you're saying, are using all these reasons, and then what they're doing is forcing us to buy from a place that is much worse than what they claim they're trying to protect us from. So they don't care about these other people or the world at large. It's just one big excuse that makes no sense once you look at the bigger picture.
Well, many of the arguments that we see coming from that side of the aisle lack logic. And, it's at some point you have to think about national security. And when you realize that the U.S. literally imports almost all of its silver, yet it is needed in so many so many respects, it's about time that they reclassified it a critical mineral. It should have
That's
been done
right.
a long time ago. And the folks in Canada tried to call it strategic about 2 years ago to have it reclassified, and it is. And that's, it's funny because a lot of the things that I've been talking about for a long time, gold and silver, which are really the opposite of the dollar, are now being quietly embraced by the US government. And both gold and silver are kind of no longer contrarian as much as they once were. Now, maybe for the mainstream it still is, but the government is looking at gold and silver as far more than archaic relics from the past. In fact, I think they are looking at gold to be part of the monetary system and looking at silver as strategic and critical as it really truly is, especially in a world that is digital. You talk about transmission of energy. It transmits civilization. Without silver, you do not have the ability to have the infrastructure that is needed to be a growing, thriving civilization. It's really important, and I think it's someone tapped Trump on the shoulder and said it's about time that we do this for this country, and I'm thankful for that. And what they've done is make it a matter of national security and national policy. They put a floor under the price of silver. I do believe that. And then you look at the largest refiner in the world, China, saying, well, we're not going to export very much anymore. It's becoming a battle. Then you look at the supplies on the London Metals Exchange, the LBMA, that are literally being bled dry. We've talked about extensively. Yeah, things are going to get interesting. And when we talk about silver, Sarah, I don't tell people to buy it to get rich or to get wealthy. It is wealth. But when you look at the size of the market cap of the silver market, it's a pimple on the elephant's rear end. It's such a small market cap. If you start to all of a sudden throw in government money, you're going to have a battle between the industrials, Tesla, Samsung, Sony, the hedge funds who smell blood in the water, the investors, and the government. All three are going to be vying for the same ounce of silver. The potential is massive, and it's not why you buy it, but it is truly has an extraordinary story behind it.
That's
and I
right.
think government acknowledging
It's
that
interesting.
puts an exclamation point behind it.
This is an interesting time. I want to, before we close out, I want to talk about tariffs in China because people have been worried about tariffs causing extreme, inflation. But from what I'm reading and seeing is that instead of digging their heels in and using the Chinese manufacturers, a lot of people are shifting to other countries like Vietnam and elsewhere to get their product so that they're not affected by these tariffs. Is that what you're seeing, and what will that do to global trade?
It's funny because Vietnam is applied to BRICS. I think that a lot of what Trump is trying to do is actually to reshore manufacturing, and you do so that's one way of starting the ball to incentivize, in essence, a weaker dollar. And because many of the tariffs that he's putting on are more like sanctions than they are tariffs.
Yeah.
I really do believe that the ultimate goal of this administration is to find a way to bring home manufacturing. The only way to do that is to massively debase the dollar. You even hear Main Street talking about the debasement trade, about the debasing dollar. You let that happen by letting the price of gold and silver go gold in particular and Bitcoin go much, much higher, which devalues the dollar. Case in point, you look at it and compare it to silver. First of all, the dollar's down 8 or 9% against the dollar index this year, but it's down 70% against silver, even with the recent pullback. So the dollar is falling against the barometers, that's gold or silver. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to do, is to devalue the dollar to reshore manufacturing, to get rid of the reserve status. As the former chief economic advisor for the Biden administration mentioned, and he wrote a report called Dethrone King Dollar. Jared Bernstein, knucklehead he was, but the whole
He
thing
was
is
a knucklehead.
to get rid of the reserve status because of Triffin's dilemma. Vice President Vance has said that. And all of the moves that they are making are saying that you look at Tether, which now has almost 13 billion in gold. and they were at the Beaver Creek Mining Summit, and their CEO of USA Tether, which is a Genius Act compliant stablecoin, is Bo Hines. He was the crypto czar for Trump through August, and they're buying up copious amounts of gold. They are becoming a massive player in it because every stablecoin backed by US Treasury lowers interest rates for the government, provides the synthetic energy to run the government, but that interest is not transferable. So they're taking it and buying gold and Bitcoin. And I think that was the deal that was kind of wink, wink made, where you continue to buy gold as a major player, almost a central bank player, to push the price of the dollar or the interest rates down. But the rising gold price devalues the dollar, which helps you then reshore manufacturing. And as we've talked about before, just to hammer it home again, Judy Shelton, Trump's nominee to run the Fed last time, says, no, they're going to peg the back end of the bond market July 4th next year. Trump told me that multiple times. She says, now you have a 20-year treasury redeemable in gold with zero interest rates attached to it. No coupon, redeemability in gold. You can bring back manufacturing at a zero upfront cost, sell the product into a massively devalued dollar.